Brett, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Vince, pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, and just through the miracle of the internet, it's about 8:30 p.m. here in the eastern part of the US. You were in Australia where it's did you say around 8:30 in the morning or
9:30 a.m. in the morning, Vince.
all right, all right. So just a convenient 12-hour difference, 13-hour difference between us.
Yeah,
But
and
either way,
following day here as well.
Okay, okay, okay. So I'm actually talking into the future. This
You
is
are
going to be fun. All right. Okay. So we're here to talk about one, your book. But
Mhm.
before we get into that, I'm always anxious to have people like you on the podcast because as a financial coach, it is the weirdest thing in the world. I have a group that I meet with on a regular basis, and we just talk shop in terms of what's happening. And when we're in that flow of talking about, oh, what budget app do you recommend, or talking to people about how to reduce their debt, the tactical parts of what we do,
Yep.
those are great conversations. But inevitably, somebody will bring up a relationship type thing, as in, I was trying to coach this couple and they start fighting and I don't know what to do, that type of thing. So we're pretty good at the tactical things. We're pretty sad as a group as far as handling relationship things.
Yeah.
So anytime I can have an expert on like you, I jump on that and take advantage. So you have been a relationship coach for about 30 years. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. A long time.
Okay. All right, great. How did you find your way into that particular field?
My background is actually in property development. So I was a property developer for about 30 years as well, 25 years to be accurate about it. And then, yeah, just through doing a personal development event, started heading off in a different direction, Vince. And I guess that happened after my first marriage collapsed. I had a very big company. The company went under, unfortunately. And then so did the marriage go with it. So it pushed me into looking at an area of life that most people in business or in finances don't look into, which is your relationship. And what I discovered and what I've seen for many years now is that if you don't get that area of your life right, you can have fame, you can have fortune, but your life sucks. It's an area of a life, I think, particularly for men, that if we don't get that, yeah, we can certainly move on to another partner. But if you don't have the right skills, the same thing is going to happen again. And we've seen that now consistently. And that's not just my view on it after 30 years of doing this. There's a lot of research to back that up. Like 73% of second marriages fail, and 93% of third marriages fail if you don't do work on yourself. So
Okay.
the odds get worse and worse when you don't master this area. So a bit like you, I started in the financial area. I started in business and spent a long career there. But the good thing was when I made that decision to learn these skills, I've been remarried now for 30 years, been with my wife Marie for 32. So clearly learned the skills, but it's not just the time together, right? That's a good indicator, but it's also the quality of the relationship. Are you good working partners together? Can you operate in a business together if you have a business? But even if you don't have a business in your home, can you work as good partners together? And they're very different roles. I think in our culture now, Vince, many people see that we're equal and it's like we're meant to share the load equally. I'm sorry, but that's just not how men and women are designed. There's a million years of evolution behind us that is imprinted into our nervous system, into the way that we react, and our behaviors are very different. So, having had to learn those skills and now teach those skills, we've expanded. We're across all the cities in Australia. We're on the west coast of the US in San Diego, starting in Raleigh in North Carolina this coming year. What we do is very popular because it's a missing skill. Like overall, if you take first marriages and we call them de facto relationships, where you're cohabiting with your partner, you haven't got married yet. If you take that into account, relationships are failing at a 60% rate. Way too high.
Wow.
Way too high. And the consequence for our kids and our future When that happens, if we don't have the skills, if you're a child of a divorced parent, you have a 50% increased chance of being divorced yourself. Greater levels of mental health problems, greater levels of not doing well academically. The list just goes on and on, Vince, which is why we're so passionate about what we do.
Yeah, and I love the way that you repeatedly refer to skills. I was looking through some of your material and I ran across a statement that said, "Love is not enough."
Yeah,
And I think that is referring back to the skills you're talking about here.
yeah,
So it's interesting in the way that we approach relationships and we even approach marriage. There's not a lot of talk about the practical skills
no.
that are needed to get through a relationship. Now, I've been married for, I think, I've been married for 32 years. Let me say that with a little bit more confident.
She'll know
And,
exactly, and guys are like,
oh, yeah,
yeah, it's in the
yeah, yeah.
range. It's in the range there
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, 30 plus, I think is the way I'll phrase it for the next several years.
Yeah, well done.
And it's probably only in the last handful that I have realized that there are skills.
Yep.
I refer to myself as a professional husband because I have the hard way learned skills that if somebody had laid it out to me in the beginning, it
Yeah.
really would have saved me a lot of heartache. But just looking back, it's like,
Mm,
wow, there are definitely things that I handle skillfully. So I definitely want to get into that, particularly when
mm.
where it pertains to money. You threw out a statistic there about the 60% rate of failure with, I believe that was first marriages. I've also heard a similar percentage attributed to causes of divorce
Yeah.
and money. I've heard people say 60%, maybe even 70% of divorces are driven by money issues. Is that does that sound directionally correct to you?
Well, again, I've seen a lot of surveys around that too, and I think that the three biggest areas of arguments is very clear. So there's again a lot of research and some extensive research done into this. So certainly money is up there as the highest area of argument. Percentages I've seen in various surveys range from 30% up to the figure you just gave of 60. Sex, second highest topic that creates disharmony in the relationship, and third is children. So money is certainly a big area, and it's one of the areas that obviously comes up for us when we're working with couples because we do wealth mentoring and business mentoring as well as part of what we do, and we see the same thing that you experience. But there's another interesting stat, which is interesting from 2 points of view, Vince. One is that it's such a high statistic. And the second one is that it's consistent between all Western countries. So US, Australia, Europe, UK, etc. 80% of divorces are filed for by women now.
Wow.
It's a very high figure, right? So that means only 20% of men seek a divorce or file for divorce. So men tend to want to stay in the relationship, but women get to a point where they're done. And what we're seeing now is one of the things that we study is human behavior and in terms of patterns of behavior. So human beings tend to react to problems, to issues in the same way. So, like yourself, as I said before, I started in business, and you tend to focus, I think, in business on strategy, right? On the mechanics of what you need to do. But behind that, what we've clearly seen is that I can give someone very clearly the strategy to make money, say, in the share market, as an example. It's not that complicated, really. I can give someone the strategy for delegating in business, which is one of the biggest problems in small businesses. Most small business owners don't want to delegate and hence restrict their business. But it's the emotional pattern that stops them from implementing the strategy. The strategy is very clear, it's very simple. And what we see in relationships is that now men are consistently acting in a particular way in relationships, and women are acting in a particular way. And this is now virtually universal. I think people don't like stereotypes, they don't want to be boxed these days. And I certainly understand that reason why, but then the problem with that attitude is you ignore what clearly is an overriding pattern. When we've got these level of statistics, 60% of divorces, 80% of women filing for divorce. Why is this happening now? Because 100 years ago, after World War II, divorces prior to World War II were only 10%. Now people go, that's because culturally it wasn't acceptable, etc. That's actually not correct, Vince. That's a popular urban myth that divorces weren't acceptable. You can certainly get divorced. That wasn't the issue. So why did it so dramatically change after World War II? Culturally, we had a massive shift. And these days, I think it's very hard to appreciate the visceral part of that. And that is that on a scale we've never seen before in human history, men went to war. We've had wars, obviously, plenty of wars before, but not on the scale we had in World War II. Like in the US and Australia, 85% of working age men were involved in the war effort. That's huge. And so we had a whole generation of men be sent off and basically experience PTSD. Didn't call it that back then, called it shell shock and things like that. But they came back seeking one thing more than anything else, and that was peace. And now, what we see in relationships, we see the second generation of men seeking peace as well, but they're seeking it all the time in relationships. And what women experience is their man is not what they would call present with them. And what that means is unspoken communication, according to two studies done in the US at a couple of universities. 93% of communication is nonverbal. It's not the words that we're using, the tone that we're using, what we're doing with our body. It's mostly non-verbal that is effective, particularly in intimate communication. So we've lost this art because of the change that happened last century of recognizing that men are not present in relationships. As a man, you well know that we can be looking at our wife, but we can be thinking about something else. And we also had this special place that we go to, which we euphemistically call the nothing box, right? Where we, yeah, and if any men are listening to this, they will know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
I have never heard it called that, but
Right.
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about. I
brother.
wanna know how
So,
that happened.
and we obviously do these events. We did 19 events last year. And it doesn't matter what audience I'm in front of. When I talk to the men about the nothing box, they're all like, yeah, brother, I know exactly what you're talking about, man. And see, women don't have a nothing box. They don't have a place where they go to because one of the evolutionary differences between men and women is that to de stress, we don't talk. We go inside ourselves to work things out. Women are exactly the opposite. It's like the yin and yang principle that exists in the entire universe. So women talk to de stress.
Okay, so let me take a couple of things that you've talked about here and try to relate them, particularly when it comes to money. So you've got 80% of divorce being filed by women. We have also talked about the fact that money is one of the leading cause of arguments within
Yes.
a marriage. Go back to that 80% number, and I believe what you're saying is one of the drivers of that is men not communicating.
Yes.
Women feel like ultimately they're not being communicated with. They get frustrated, and that's what drives things.
Yes. So let's
If we were
jump into that if I can. So
sure,
that argument comes up a lot because women need to talk to de-stress. If a guy is not physically present, and there's a particular way of doing that that somehow in our culture now we seem to have missed, there's an energy that a masculine man brings to it. And this is not something that's airy fairy. When I'm saying it's an energy, what I mean is a man can change his state to produce a higher level of testosterone. A woman is designed through evolution to experience that, to register that. When she does, her levels of oxytocin increase. Oxytocin is the connector hormone and also the relaxer hormone. So it makes her feel relaxed, not stressed all the time. Because women are constantly surveying their environment to see how safe they are. Men, we don't walk out the front door and worry about our safety. Women do. So when it comes to a discussion about money, this is a critical area for women of safety. A house is not just a house, it's a home. It's a place of connection. It's a place of memories. It's a place of emotionally feeling safe. That's why she goes around and checks the doors and the windows at night or asks her husband to do that. So when it comes to money, if the discussion is not going in the right direction, if he's not present, if he's not reassuring her, not necessarily by his words or even what he's doing, which seems a bit strange, but more by the fact that he's got it, he's handling it, it's going to be okay. If he's not providing that in a discussion around money, it's going sideways, Vince. It's going sideways very quickly. And then what will happen is all he's going to hear is criticism. And when he hears criticism, he shuts down emotionally, closes off even more, which then makes her even more anxious. And now the whole sideway conversation is going to happen around money. And it's not going to be a good one.
So let's talk about that, dig into that a little bit from a couple of different angles.
Sure.
The whole concept of CFO at home is based on this idea that there is this one person in the home who is really more concerned about money issues. And that is a gender neutral
Yes.
concept.
Yes.
Sometimes it's men, sometimes it's women. Let's take what you just laid out there and let's look at it from the perspective of the man trying to have a conversation with a wife about money. And just because of the way he's put together, for some reason,
Yeah.
he's the one who's really taking the reins of the finances in the house. In terms of broaching that subject with his wife, somebody who certainly wants to live life, wants to feel safe, wants to do all those things, but
Yeah.
really may not be that into money.
Yep.
How what are the mistakes that a man makes in terms of trying to open that conversation up?
Yeah. So if he goes to her, say perhaps having a conversation around how the household budget's going, and it's not going well, they're spending too much, they need to rein in the spending. Often men will go and say, start the conversation by, you're spending too much. That conversation is already gone sideways the moment he opened his mouth. Because for women, I'm sure you've heard the joke about women's math. When a woman goes out to shop and it's 50% off, then it's okay. If I've saved, it's $200 and now it's $100, I've saved $100. That means I've got another $100 I can go and spend. So women think about money from that point of view very differently. They don't want to be controlled by their partner. So there's that element to the conversation. The second element of the conversation is almost in the reverse, that yes, they want money to be under control. They want to know that the budget is under control. So if he's going and starting a conversation that way, it's going sideways. If he starts a conversation with we, the conversation is going to go better because men tend to use singular language. Women use complementary language, which is always we. So, in terms of how we communicate, men communicate much more directly and bluntly than women do. So, women tend to want to include, if it's a group of women, they want to include the women. In fact, down to interesting scientific perspective on this, if you ever notice when a group of women get together, they'll walk up to each other and then someone will say something and then someone else, they'll all laugh. Why? Same phenomenon I was talking about before. When women laugh, it produces oxytocin. So it connects. Men, a guy will walk up another guy and go, buddy, haven't seen you for ages. You're looking a bit round around the stomach there. What's going on? You put on a few pounds, buddy. Okay? We'll tear each other down
All
to
right.
connect with each other. So when it comes to a conversation around money, as a man, you have to be aware of those differences in communication. So I'm more technically proficient, having had the background. I've got a degree from university in property valuation and property development. I've studied for 20 years the stock market. I'm more technically proficient in both those two areas than my wife is. But I will always go to my wife before I make an investment and get her opinion on it, because her view on it is going to be very differently constructed to my view. Men tend to be very singular focused, destination focused. Women are more holistically seeing the whole picture. Why? Because our brains are actually designed differently. The connection between left and right hemisphere, which is called the corpus callosum, exchanges information. It's actually bigger in a woman's brain. They have more gray matter in their brain than men do. And it allows them to see something holistically, see it all. We tend to do one thing at a time. We may get to see the whole picture, but we'll do it segmentally rather than a woman's one view. So, getting my wife's view on something, like I mentioned before, we bought a commercial property in Florida. And when we we're looking around for that, I went to this other center and the numbers all look great. We drove up into the car park. We were walking around, having a look at the shops. And based on the numbers and the leases and things, I thought it looked pretty good. And then my wife said, "This doesn't add up." And I'm like, "What do you mean it doesn't add up?" She said, "Look at the demographics. It's saying like it's a high income area, but look at the cars. Look at the clothes in the shop." And I'm a guy, I wasn't looking at the clothes in the shop. She's looking at the clothes in the shop. And she's going, "It doesn't add up." And when I looked at it, she was spot on. And based on that, we didn't actually go ahead and buy the center.
The single biggest money mistakes, and there's actually one specifically that I'm thinking about, that I have made during my marriage was one time where I completely shut my wife out. I involved her, but every time she would try to question the move,
Yes.
I would get aggressive
Yes.
to the point where she just went, "Okay,
Yep.
do what you want to do."
Yeah.
And that was the biggest mistake ever. She was waving the yellow flag saying,
Yes.
"Stop."
Yes.
I could tell in retrospect, I was threatening her sense of security because this was a significant investment,
Yep.
but I basically, it's probably the single worst behavior I've had in 30 years of marriage, particularly when it comes to money, and probably in my top 5 ever of mishandling situations. So, from the school of hard knocks, I identify with what you're saying.
Yep.
You have to listen to those instincts.
I
So,
think it's difficult for
mhm,
men because there's another dynamic that I haven't mentioned, which is, as I said before, 93% of communication is non-verbal. So when a man is doing something like that, and we're very single focused and we've got our own idea about what we're doing, she'll want to have an input into whatever it is. If it's a guy making decisions, we'll talk about if you like, if it's a woman handling the money, how that would be different. But in this case, where we're talking about guys handling it, and he's already got his idea. He's got it sorted out. He's got his little structure in place of how it's going to work. She's going to want to have input into that. And I think as a man, if you're the one handling the money, you have to allow her to have input into that. She doesn't necessarily want you to do what she's saying, but that's how it seems to men, because there are two different states we can be in communication. So a woman can be in what's called her masculine state, where she's going to be feeling stressed. She's going to feel like security and safety is being threatened. And she's going to come at him in a heightened state of anxiety. And in that state, it's going to sound to him like criticism. If you interpret it that way, there's only one way as men we're going to react, and that is we're going to shut down, close off. The problem is now we're not allowing that very important resource of seeing things holistically that she can bring to whatever it is that we're looking at. She will see it differently to us. However, if we view it as, okay, she's bringing something to the table that I'm not going to see, and take that into account in our decision making, then we end up with a better decision. And again, that's not my view, Vince. There's some really good research showing that if men and women work together in finances, the end result is actually better.
So this masculine energy that she may bring to the conversation,
Yeah.
is that something that we as men provoke out of women, or is that something that is just a part of the natural back and forth, and it's up to us not to shut down in the face of that?
Yeah. So she is naturally, her brain is designed for security and safety. So she is going to be scanning what we call the kingdom, your lives together, right? As king.
Right.
So she's going to be scanning your lives together, kids, money, house, relationships. She's scanning everything. And when there's something out of place, she is going to want to talk about it. Now, as men, when something's out of place, we don't want to talk about it. We want to solve it. And that doesn't necessarily involve a conversation for a man. So when she comes to talk about it, particularly when it comes to money, and she wants to have this conversation about what's going on with money. Either it's the new investment you want to make, or we're going to sell the house and we're going to do a reno, or maybe it's just about day-to-day finances. She's going to want to talk about it. And the odd thing for men, I'm not saying it's odd at all, but for men it appears odd, is that a woman, when she starts a conversation, may not know how she feels about it. So men have a destination when we start a conversation, right? There has to be a purpose. We want to get to a conclusion. And generally, we've got a conclusion already in mind before we start the conversation. She doesn't. And I'm sure as a man, as a husband of 30 years, you've experienced your wife coming to you and she starts a conversation and you'll cover 30 topics in 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, and I'm just thinking, this goes through my mind all the time. It's like, where's this going? Okay, okay, get to the punchline.
Yeah, get to the point, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
for women, there is no point. I know it sounds weird and it's not sexist at all. To women, there is no point. They will work out the point of the conversation in the discovery of the conversation. So,
Yeah, yeah, which in a way is a much more graceful way of doing it. If
hmm,
I'm hearing you correctly, they're thinking out loud.
yeah,
They really want to collaboratively
yes,
think this thing out in real time, as opposed to bringing preconceived notions to the table, and then
absolutely.
it's your idea versus my idea. Okay.
Correct. But men, because of the way we're orientated in conversation, when she starts out going, well, why haven't you? Or you always, when it comes to a financial conversation, you always take control of everything and never involve me. You always spend too much money on your car. And if she's coming like that, she is in that heightened state of anxiety, what we call the masculine state for her, right? And what will happen is he will step to what we call euphemistically the feminine state for him, which is a state of non certainty. Now he goes into doubt. Now he goes into defense. And if he's going into that state, that then heightens her anxiety. Oh shit, he doesn't have it handled. Oh my God, he doesn't actually know what's going on with the money. Oh my God, I better start taking control of this. And this is where we see these really poor conversations happen in marriages, in relationships. And if people don't learn the skills, they end up getting divorced to solve a communication problem. Vince.
Yeah. So in that particular situation, what is the skillful way when the wife or your partner, if you're a man, starts coming at you with that masculine energy? What's the skillful way of handling that? We're talking about the skills people should have.
Yes.
What skill do you need to pull out of the toolbox to handle that situation
Yeah.
better?
In my own journey, even though I built a $400 million company in my 30s, so I had developments going on all across Australia, 70, $100 million buildings under construction. So when I was at work, I was in that clear state of certainty. I knew what I was doing. I knew exactly how to do it. When I'd come home in domestic area, I wasn't in that same state. And so it was quite clear to me after the divorce that I didn't have the skills in that area of my life, which is why I started to build them and develop them. And when she's coming like that, Most men these days take that as criticism. That is now in every conversation we are having with new clients. That is the determining factor in the conversation. That he is hearing it as criticism. She, on the other hand, doesn't mean it as criticism, but she's in that heightened state of anxiety where it's he doesn't listen, he's not hearing me, he's not present to me. And the guy's like, "What do you mean I'm not present? I'm here, I'm listening to you." Yeah, he's there and he's listening, but he's not fully present. He's thinking as she's talking. And that phenomenon, what we now know is, and we know it again from lots of research and experimental stuff that's been done, like where you can track where eyeballs are, what we're looking at. And
Right.
so a woman, we now know, can read the micro movements of your face. So she'll pick up the tiny. Have you ever seen those FBI interviews done where they slow the video down to ultra slow motion, and you can see
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these micro movements going on in someone's? A woman's
Right.
brain is designed to read that, and so when the guy says he's present and he's looking at her, she can tell he's not fully present. He's thinking as she's talking, and to a woman, what that means is you're not interested, you're not hearing me, and the emotional impact of that for all women, you don't care and you don't love me. It's that deep. So she feels alone and isolated.
So going back to that specific situation, is the skillful way for a man to handle that, is it to just reassure her that I'm present
Yep.
and I hear you? It's not really a response that's needed. It's just really an affirmation of, okay, I get it.
Spot on. Spot on. Yep. I hear what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. I get it. You may have to repeat that a couple of times.
Right.
But it's also the difficult part here is that as men, we want to focus on strategy, just like you just did then. Yeah. You want a very simple solution to it, right?
Right.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. So there's a physical aspect to that that we teach inside our events of how a man needs to do that. And most men don't know how to do it. So
Right.
it's a heightened state of your physicality that's present as well. And that's not going to be there all the time, Vince. It's
Right.
only during those conversations around kids, sex, money that
Right.
we need to bring that around the house day to day, talking about what you're having for dinner. Sure, it doesn't need to be there. But when
Right.
it comes to that important conversation around these critical topics for her,
Right.
that's when it needs to be there and present.
And as a man, I'm still trying to create a simple formula here. So let me kind of walk it out here.
Yeah.
So I come to my wife years ago with this idea of an investment, and I'm telling her all about it. I'm telling her about all these people I've been talking to
Yeah.
and plans and everything. And now in real time, I can see those a certain amount of masculine energy
Yes.
that triggered in her, and she starts bringing up all of these hesitations and worries and questions, and and some of them are good questions, by the way.
Of course.
In that situation, it sounds like what we're saying is that maybe at that moment, all I needed to do was reassure her, or be really present, assure her verbally and non-verbally that I hear what you're saying,
Yep.
and then maybe just leave that alone for a little while. I'm not going to solve that one in one shot.
Yes.
So my only mission in that conversation is, okay, I hear you, and maybe drop it for a bit.
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think that's definitely what we're saying. That's a good strategy to bring. Again, though, I'll repeat it, that it's also that energetic state that we need to bring to that. She's going to be more interested in that, which is very hard for men to understand because we look for facts, we listen for facts. She reads emotion. She's reading you the whole time. So she's going to ask those questions. It's a completely different language. So she's going to ask those questions to test how certain this man in front of me is about what he's saying. She's not interested in the facts. She'll follow you with that investment if you're certain enough about it.
So if I act certain even though she's asking questions I don't have the answer to? Is that it?
That won't work.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
But
But
if you
is
are
that
certain, if you are
mhm,
certain,
alright,
if you're in that state and you're absolutely certain, but you also have to take into account what she's saying because, as you said
right,
before, she may have some relevant facts, like with my wife around the shopping centre, that I had not taken into account. And when we got to the one that we actually bought, she was like, "Yep, this," and her words were exactly this: "This feels good to me." And when a woman
right,
says it feels good to me, that's not just a throwaway line. What she means by that is, I've summed up all the things, emotional and factual, and this feels good to me in summing
right,
all that up. Now, if you
right,
want to take it the other way, there are two ways that women want to handle the money. The first way is not the best way. That is that she's in fear about him, fear about security and safety, and she will take on the burden of handling the money because she doesn't trust him. Now, that's not going to work for her because she's going to be stressed all the time, anxious all the time, and on edge all the time, angry all the time. And of course, it's not going to work for him because he's going to feel demasculated. The second way is that she has got better skills when it comes to money. Maybe she had a family that was good for money. Maybe she's been educated in money and she has better skills. But in that case, when she comes to discuss the money, she is still going to want to do what women do, and you see it corporately as well. Their behavior is collective. So they want to get everyone's opinion, which, if you think about it, is a good way of doing it, right? They want to get everyone's opinion and then come to a consensus about what to do. Men would tend to get everyone's opinion and then go, this is what we're doing. So she'll want to come and have this cooperative conversation with him, sharing the emotional burden of the decision. She'll be happy to go and implement as long as she's got his presence and input into that decision.
so again, the key in that situation is truly being present and communicating that both verbally and non-verbally.
Correct.
Let's go back to the first example you gave there, where maybe she's doing it not because she has the skills, but I assume in that first situation, if she doesn't have the skills, she's basically doing it out of fear,
Yes,
trying to gain that safety that she craves,
correct.
and she sees that the man's not doing it. So I'm going to take this on, even though it's not really naturally the way I'm cut. I feel pressure because now all of this is on me, but I'm going to pick it up anyway in order to try to fill that void that's there because I don't feel secure.
That's correct, Vince. That's exactly correct. As you well know, our skills with money are either gained one or two ways. They're gained partly by culture. The culture that we grow up in obviously affects our view about money. Like in Australia, we have a phenomenon in our culture, and we call it the tall poppy syndrome, which means is that if someone does well, we want to chop them down to be the same as everybody else. In America, it's a little different. If someone's doing well, it's more like you want to know, how are you doing that? How can I learn to do that, to do as well as you? So that affects us. Our parents' attitude to money definitely affects us in terms of what we've modeled unconsciously and consciously, whether it's a good attitude towards money or a bad attitude towards money. And obviously, educationally, it affects our attitude towards money. So, what we find is couples tend to bring two different attitudes towards money into the relationship. And everything else in the relationship, you have to meld those attitudes, opinions, and behaviors together so they're effective. In the scenario we're talking about, where she's stressed and she doesn't trust him, generally what you'll see for the guy is that he doesn't have a good attitude towards money. He's either frightened of it. His parents always used to pay for everything for him. He never really had to handle money himself. He never really paid his own bills. And when he got into a marriage, he then just handed it over to her and let her do it. He needs to step up. He needs to learn those skills. He needs to step up to have the same level of skill. It doesn't mean that she can't then handle it all, but he needs to be able to have that proper input into the relationship. If he doesn't, this is again a consistent pattern that we've seen, Vince. The relationship is most likely, it's very rare, there's only a few occasions I can think of where it hasn't. And we're talking now over 30 years, we've obviously handled thousands and thousands of marriages, been involved in thousands and thousands of families. So the vast majority is the relationship will terminate. There will be a divorce. And that's where women
And so
go, I've had enough. I'm sick of handling all this stuff. I might, where they go to is, I'm handling it all anyway. I might as well be on my own.
yeah, and as far as the communication is concerned, and I've seen this on both sides, there's a couple of phenomena that I've seen. Is one spouse will try to engage the other into these conversations, and they'll get the, "Oh, I don't know, you handle that"
Yeah.
response. And the other is when the other spouse has obviously already shut down. And it's as opposed to having that masculine response,
Yes.
they're past that. They just shut down. It sounds like that those are situations where maybe damage has already been done. So the
Yep.
things that we've been talking about here in terms of I don't feel like you hear me, those kind of things,
Yes.
that's already occurred and you're just seeing the results of that damage.
Agreed. We say that people don't fall out of love, they fall into resentment. So people only leave a relationship if their emotional needs are not being satisfied. So when we're in the finance area, we're talking about this, that resentment for past failings or past non involvement obviously comes up in a relationship. The good thing is that in our 3 day events, we're able to reverse that. We can get people out of resentment back to feeling love for each other because they loved each other when they first met. What happens is we don't know how to satisfy each other's needs when we don't understand these principles. And people fall into resentment. Then, when they're trying to have a conversation around money, now it's no longer really about the money. We might be talking about the money, but it's an unsatisfied emotional need, as I talk about in the book, that's going on underneath that topic of conversation, whether it's sex, money, or kids.
So, how much of a part is reestablishing this communication that
Mm.
we've talked about? How important is that?
So
I,
important, so critically
yeah,
important. We
yeah.
don't want to just be married to each other. We want a great depth of connection with each other. And we can have that because that is a skill in communication that unfortunately we're not taught at school. We don't even really see it around us where we pick it up culturally. And it's funny, but we use that word a lot and we don't really think about it. We're so influenced by what's happening around us because we live in a cult. It's called a culture. We just don't realize. And if it's not around us, if we're not seeing
Wow.
it around us, then we're not aware of it. But even as we're watching other couples communicate to each other, we're not learning from that the right way to communicate to our partner.
Yeah, I was sharing earlier that as a financial coach, you
Mm.
do run into these situations where there is just already so much pre-existing
Yeah,
tension with a couple
yeah,
that I've adopted this whole idea of I'm a financial coach. In order for me to be effective, people have to be coachable.
yes,
Now, sometimes if it's a light thing, maybe I can help them through it. But at times, it's guys, you're not coachable. You
yeah,
have something going on here
yeah,
that is beyond my skill set.
yes,
I recommend you go do something about that,
yep,
become coachable,
yep.
and then come back and see me. So I think that's what we're talking about here.
It
And
is.
the great thing about this conversation is I don't like to just leave people without any kind of reference. And luckily with people like you, I think I have one more resource maybe to recommend to them. Let's talk about your book here for a second.
Mm.
It's called Samurai Love: Cut Through the BS in relationships, it's actually spelled out Bulls star T.
Yep,
So you can say BS, you can say bull crap. I think we all know what it means.
we do.
Tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure. So we wrote the book out of the 30 years of experience in dealing with relationships. And the book has, you were talking before about giving people strategies. So the book has the strategies in it to realize what's really going on in the relationship. It's not about the money, it's not about the sex, it's not about the kids. There are unsatisfied emotional needs. And these needs, as men, we have very different needs to women, very different needs to women. Men, we love a thank you, we love a congratulations, we love, we really appreciate that. And women can be like, hang on, why the hell should I? Why should I thank him for going out to work? I work too. That's the culture that we have, but that's not recognizing that for men, it's really important to hear those things in a relationship. But equally, on the other side, for women, from a man's point of view, it's about providing that presence for her, understanding that she needs to talk, she needs to get those words out. We need to be present, we need to listen to her, even when we don't even know where the conversation's going. And understanding in the book how to work through that, what affects us. As you said before, if you're going to implement a strategy, you have to be coachable, which means you have to be able to listen. You have to be able to change your emotional response to what's being said and then implement what's being said. But if you're constantly arguing with your partner, it's not going to happen. And one of the great things, Vince, that we've seen is that we have another saying that we use a lot, which is that two is more powerful than one. And financially, when we see a couple come together, it's incredible what they can actually produce being on the same page.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just from a practical perspective, on the flip side, one of the most devastating things that can happen to a person, just financially in their
Mm.
life, is divorce.
Well,
So if you can work together, how much can you achieve? And also, if you can't make that relationship work out,
yeah.
then all of a sudden those funds that were going to build a single life have now gone in two different directions trying to build two separate lives. And yeah, it's incredible what the difference there is.
Mm.
So we will leave a link for Samurai Love cut through the bullcrap in
Mhm.
relationships in the key links of this episode as a part of the show notes. I also want to mention your online headquarters, that is relationship.org.
Yeah.
You talked about the events that you guys have. I
Mm.
would imagine that if people want to find out if one of your events is coming to a town near them, that's where they check.
Absolutely. Yeah, we mentioned all the events on there. As I said, in San Diego, we've got 4 events in 2026. So one about every 3 months, and also one coming up in Raleigh in the second half of 2026.
Okay. And that's coming to certain parts of the US. The book is available wherever fine books are sold. And again, we'll have that link directly. And finally, before I let you go, there is a house rule here. If you
Yes.
have a podcast, you must talk about your podcast. So tell us a bit about that.
Thank you. So we've got the Relationship Code podcast. This episode will be showing on it, and that's available on all platforms, obviously Google, Apple, etc.
Awesome. We will be sure to add that to the key links and check it out. So, Brett, I really want to thank you for your time. I got to admit, when I came into this conversation, it was like, Brett's going to give me 3 tips to break open conversation in your marriage about finances. I had this very black and white thing in
Mhm.
my mind, but even during our conversation, you showed me that's a very guy way of thinking about it. And I think the big takeaway is the communication part, is that verbal and nonverbal communication,
Yeah,
which I'm sure you talk about, you certainly talk about in your events, you talk about it in the book.
yeah,
So the big takeaway I think from this conversation is check out the resources that you have to learn these skills, because these skills are going to help you in every aspect of your marriage. So it's not only if you're not communicating about money, it's if you're not communicating about those other things you're talking about, you're not communicating about sex, you're not communicating
Mm.
on issues with the kids, et cetera, et cetera. All those things have a key to run through them. So again, thank you for providing resources, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in an area where you have an event, or if you just can pick up a book or access a podcast, your information is available. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on CFO at Home today.
My pleasure, Vince. And again, thanks so much for hosting me. It's really great to be here. Thank you.